Hello and welcome to another episode of I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, a first responder mental health podcast. I'm your host, Erin Jane, and today I am joined by the delightful detective Heidi Chance. So Heidi is like I just mentioned, she's a retired detective with over 27 years of experience in law enforcement, including 25 years with the Phoenix Police Department. Where she was an undercover detective investigating human trafficking cases for more than 13 years. She's a subject matter expert in the field of sex trafficking and is the founder of A Chance for Awareness, an organization dedicated to raising the awareness of sex trafficking, where Heidi provides training and courses to help law enforcement members and civilian participants understand the methodology and characteristics of groomers and offenders, and about the potential vulnerabilities of victims. Most recently, she's become a published author with the book Talk to Them, Navigating Difficult Conversations with Youth in a Digital Age. Thank you so much for your time today, Heidi.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for your time.
No, wonderful. And can I say it's been such an absolute privilege to, obviously, the people that I interview. I do a little bit of research on, and the dedication to the work that you do is so brilliant and inspiring and completely commendable, because it's not an easy subject to be in the depths of all day, every day. So thank you for what it is that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we sort of delve into obviously all things human trafficking, sex trafficking and all that kind of thing, what drew you to a career path down law enforcement in the first place?
Well, my dad was a Phoenix officer as well. And so when I was learning how to drive at 16 years old, I realized that I had inherited his characteristic of always being in the right place at the right time. That's a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah.
And actually, at 16 years old, while driving and learning how to drive, I had two instances where basically I was my dad's backup, so to speak.
Wow.
The one instance was I worked at a yogurt store, and my dad would, drive over there to come get me, and then I would drive us home.
Yeah.
And one day I was driving us through the parking lot, and this is a shopping center, and there was a shoe store right near where we needed to get to the exit of the parking lot to the light to leave the area. And these individuals ran out to the car that was in front of us with guns and a bunch of shoes. And they had just robbed the shoe store.
Yeah.
And so my dad looks at me, I look at my dad, he's like, follow that car. And so we ended up, he got on the phone, and this is back in the day when it was like a brick phone with the antenna on the thing.
Yeah.
And, trying to give a description of these individuals and, match what was already being called in at the same time by the store. And it ended up where they got away from us, but we got the plate and all those things. So being a good witness.
Yeah.
And then another instance was he always taught me, when driving, to look down alleys, every alley. And we happened to look down our own alley and saw two individuals jumping over the fence of our neighbor's house. So he said, pull up to the house. And I pulled up, and he ran inside to get his, badge and gun and radio. And I took it upon myself to go ahead and drive around the corner to cut them off.
Oh, no.
Like, no fear, 16 years old.
Yeah.
I'm going to help my dad. And so he had jumped over or exited our yard and was coming up the alley, and I was at this end, and we kind of met and, caught them in the middle. And, obviously super dangerous of me. Hello.
Yes.
But they
very
were just,
much so.
They were just committing a burglary. They didn't have any weapons or anything.
Yeah.
And we were able to hold on to them until patrol officers came.
A good cordon and containment.
But yeah, without thinking though, I literally went and moved into action. And so I've been called ever since to, do a job in law enforcement for sure.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And it definitely sounds like it was in your genes from a very, very, very young age.
Yeah.
And so I think I mentioned it in the intro that you spent a significant career, 25 years with Phoenix Police Department in Arizona, and obviously, given the breadth of your work now, a lot of that has involved the sex trafficking and human trafficking spectrum. Um, Sort of what drew you towards that as like a specialization, in your career?
Yeah. So basically, I was working patrol in a precinct that was mostly residential,
Hmm.
and I started a family. And so, being pregnant, I had tested for a position as a school resource officer
Okay.
because a lot of people don't think about female officers as mothers as well. But I ended up getting the position, and I moved to school resource officer.
Hmm.
And then I blinked, and 6 years went by. And towards the latter half of my time there as an SRO,
Hmm.
um, basically we don't get to take the police car home. And so I was turning the keys in at the station, and I walked past an area of the precinct where we hold juveniles when we're interviewing them, whether they committed a crime or they're a victim. It's an area to keep them away from adults
Yeah.
and safe.
Yeah.
And so I passed by, and there's a little window there, and I looked in and I saw a girl that I recognized when she was at the school in seventh or eighth grade, which would have
Hmm.
been, 14, 13, 14, 15 years old. On this day, she was still a juvenile, 16, almost 17.
Hmm.
And she recognized me. And so I popped my head in there and I asked her, "Hey, why are you in trouble?" And she had said she was under arrest for prostitution. And this is way back when we were arresting anyone and everyone. But I had been a cop for 6, 7 years by then, and I was just shocked that a kid would be involved in prostitution. And I
Yeah.
didn't even think that that was a thing that happened. And I think that,
Mm.
I hope that that's impactful for people to hear me say that as a police officer,
Yeah.
because it should be shocking to other people as well. But they need to know that that is happening. And I didn't
Yeah.
know. And I feel bad that I didn't realize that that happened to kids. And
Hmm.
I think that was around the time that this started blowing up in a sense for
Yeah.
Phoenix Police Department um, as a police agency recognizing that kids are getting involved in human trafficking. Right around
Yeah.
that time, there was an incident involving a girl that was held in a dog crate. And basically, men would come to the apartment and have sex with her. And then outside of that time, she'd be kept in this dog crate. And she was a runaway juvenile. It was an 18 and 19-year-old male and female suspect that
Yeah.
had her held up in this apartment. And officers went looking for her as a missing juvenile 2 other times and didn't find her in the apartment because they had like a waterbed,
Hmm.
um, where they had built like a locking mechanism, and they stuffed her underneath the waterbed and
Oh.
told her and threatened her to be quiet when the officers were there. And we didn't find her. And ultimately, mom kept saying, "She's in there. I know she's in there." And we found her
Yeah.
on the third time. So we
Jesus.
were able to rescue her.
How heartbreaking. And I mean, obviously, yeah, like seeing this kind of stuff would you can hear it in like the passion in which you talk about it really,
Yeah.
drew you to that sort of work. So was that kind of like eyes on the prize, like that was the mission of you becoming a detective to work in the area for which you found yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I knew I was fulfilled with being a school resource officer, and I
Hmm.
knew I wanted to move around the police agency for the
Yeah.
rest of my career and see what I wanted to do. I mean, there's so many opportunities you can do, homicide detective, robbery, crimes against children, internet crimes, K9, the air unit, SWAT team. There's a lot of jobs within the job of being a
Yeah.
police officer.
Yeah.
And I was, thinking about what do I want to be when I grow up, really. I've done patrol, I've done SRO, and then this happened. And so I was very intrigued on how this was happening. And that's
Hmm.
what made me want to test for the position and see if I could help.
Yeah. Okay. And so obviously that led you into the world and a very dark and murky and probably heartbreaking world of where you are, interacting with not only the victims but the offenders of these kind of crimes. Talk to me about what the beginning was like for you and what your duties involved.
Yeah, so the beginning My nose is running, sorry. Started with obviously learning how to be an undercover. And back in, it was 2000, well, I started doing temporary assignments while I was still a school resource officer and I was testing for it. So it was 2008, 2007.
Yep.
And what I noticed was I literally had like a 20-minute briefing, and then I was thrown out on the street to have buyers, sex buyers, they used to be referred to as Johns, solicit sex from me. And looking back now and all that I know, that was super dangerous. And I feel like, and part of what I do now is train law enforcement, train female officers to be safe in these undercover situations. Because luckily, knock on wood, nothing happened, but something definitely could have. And especially when we're having situations where buyers are a little bit more dangerous now. But basically, I also was shocked with the first time that I stepped out on the street. Within 45 seconds, I had a vehicle pull up on me and a male individual solicited sex from me. It was that quick. It was shocking that it was that much of a demand and that much of a, almost like bees swarming around. Like that whole night that I think we arrested 18.
Jesus.
Only in a few hours with 5 female officers, and we would just switch out.
Yep.
It's heartbreaking how many men buy sex is what it is. And I realized that very quickly.
Yeah. And so was that sort of the like the first role of the duties in terms of the illegal prostitution, and then did that position sort of, I guess, alter over time when human trafficking and sex trafficking became, I guess, kind of maybe what people would have an idea of it being today?
Yeah. So I have the unique perception of when I first started, law enforcement was focusing on the prostitutes. We were arresting prostitutes all day long. In fact, the 3 squads that were originally there only had 1 female officer allowed on each squad because the main intent was we would do the female searches and help interview, and the male detectives would be the undercovers arresting prostitutes.
Okay.
Whereas I was there so long, I got to see the evolution and the change of how we recognize that these women, predominantly women, were victims, not suspects actually, and that they were actually victims of human trafficking through the means of force, fraud, or coercion. And I witnessed us change our behavior and our reaction to that. And I now can tell you that these squads outweigh women to men because the focus is where it should have been all along, the actual demand, which are the sex buyers that are soliciting sex on a daily basis all day long, every day. And then the traffickers who are supplying the demand and seeking out victims to supply the demand. So we need female officers to engage in an undercover capacity with those 2 targeted suspects.
Yeah, exactly. And did any of your work as well like involve sort of the like, I guess, computer or digital side of, I know that there's like websites and I guess phone lines and all that kind of thing, like soliciting business? Like, did you guys have any interaction with anything like that, or is it purely sort of like the street based stuff?
No, absolutely. That also evolved. So, with the back in the day, the means for advertisements were Backpage.com, if you're familiar with Backpage, which was a classified ad basically for all prostitution ads, the main hub, the main one.
So like a Craigslist for prostitution, basically.
Yes, but the Craigslist also had the adult services section of Craigslist where you could purchase people for sex there as well. So when our government did an investigation on those 2 entities and basically took them out, all these other little websites popped up, and now we have a lot of them, and they're all platforms that are not in the United States, and so they're not really concerned with complying with our subpoenas and search warrants. So something had to be done. I mean, we can't allow people to be purchased by other people.
Yes, of course.
But in essence, they did have a law enforcement liaison. We had a law enforcement portal. We were able to, subpoena back page, and they provided us, who posted this ad, their email address, all those things. And now we really don't have that.
Yeah.
But we have other ways,
Yeah.
to gather evidence, but it is a little more difficult now. And
Mm-hmm.
then also in the evolution of all of this, we started being used as not only, prostitutes out on the street, and then escorts, prostitutes, advertising on these advertisements and doing hotel dates, but we're also moved into engaging with traffickers,
Mm-hmm.
where before we would actually, consistent with what was out on the street, if I were to engage with a trafficker, I would be out of pocket, which is a term, used to describe that I'm violating some rule, and
Okay.
I would have been beaten over that. And so we never engaged with traffickers. I would,
Yeah.
not even look at them in the eye. I would turn around and walk the other way, because that's what was consistent with what was going on with the victims out there.
Okay.
And now we're engaging with them. And so that's where I use social media and other apps, and platforms where I have undercover accounts all over the place. And I engage with traffickers. I call it catfishing
Yeah.
pimps. And we've had some success, because you never know who you're talking to. And I unfortunately have developed a skill to be a very good liar and make you believe that I am someone I am not, and so much that you commit the crime of engaging in and recruiting and grooming me and enticing me to be a prostitute for you. And that has worked very well. I have extradited individuals from, across the United States to Arizona to see a judge. They've never seen my face. It is scary though, because there's times when I've had traffickers scream at me, cuss me out. Yes, we're only on the phone, but having someone scream at you, and you've been talking to them, and they've been on this emotional roller coaster with you,
Yeah.
treating you like they would, in the kind of honeymoon phase of a relationship, who they think they're in a relationship with. And then they scream at you the next minute. That's, traumatizing.
Yeah.
I don't normally get
Absolutely.
talked to that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, I went through all of that because I see the end game.
Yeah.
And the end game for me is to get that person in custody. So I don't care what I have to go through to get that, because then that
Absolutely.
person won't be offending on anyone else.
Absolutely. And it was something, as I was, doing my research before we jumped on today, it was something that I was actually incredibly interested in. And because 13 years sounds like, and obviously you now carry it into your after service life, but 13 years really heavily involved in these kinds of investigations, I can imagine that they would take a significant toll on you personally, psychologically, emotionally, like you were just talking about. Like, talk to me about how you coped, during that period. Like, did it affect your, your personal relationships? Like, you mentioned that you're a mom. I can imagine, you might see your own children's faces and the faces of, juvenile victims, and as well. And I'm asking multiple questions, so I apologize. But and how did the department set you guys up to be supported in that capacity?
Well, as far as the coping, I think it's dentists and cops that have the highest divorce rate, right?
Dentist.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, my marriage didn't survive, and it takes two to tango, and I'm sure I had a part in that.
Yeah.
Um, I was never at home. When
Yeah.
we're talking about these cases, and I'm talking about engaging with these traffickers or rescuing these victims, I have worked 36 hours before straight, with no sleep, no shower, missing meals.
Yeah.
Um, it is high stress, and I got to see this thing through to the
Mm-hmm.
end. And that's not just a one time in a year, that is on a regular
All the
basis.
time.
And I feel, really called to tell, the public that these detectives are working so hard,
Yeah.
like really hard. And, I feel, I'm still in law enforcement at a different agency, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
still doing human trafficking, and I'm still helping with
Yeah.
undercover work as well. Here I am, almost 27 years on with law enforcement.
Yeah.
But I'm not in the trenches like
Yeah.
they are right now, and
Mm-hmm.
they are run ragged. They are trying to wear many hats. They are, doing the undercover work. And then the second, like, I'd have a day where I'm out on the street in full, like, wearing a wig, gross looking on the street. And then patrol would have a juvenile that they just rescued, and I'd have to go change modes in my head of undercover to now I'm a detective and I have to forensically interview this victim and go interview the victim and then write warrants and then go serve the warrants and then collect evidence and then take this victim to where they're going to be placed at and then interview the suspect and then book them into custody. And that's hours. That's hours and hours more than, the regular patrol shift. You work your 10 hours and you go home.
Yep.
We don't really go home, so to speak, because even going home, I'm like literally, waking up in the middle of the night and writing a memo note to myself on my phone. Don't forget to add this to the search warrant. Don't forget to do that. Don't forget to ask somebody to dump the phone for me as soon as possible. Call this person, set this up, check in with the victim, get the victim advocate on board, all the things after every single interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and those like resolution phases of investigations can be, you know what I mean? Like, especially if it's like a long protracted one, those, I worked at the crime department back in Australia when I was a detective, and they would it would be go, go, go constantly like that, could be like a week long, and you just like.
I have to-do list and sticky notes everywhere.
Yeah. I think our brains must work very, very similarly, because I have sticky notes and Post-it notes and everything, and like little cue cards. Yeah. So
and people come to my office and they're like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "This is what work looks like."
Exactly. It's like you're like, you think this is messy? You should be inside my brain right now. And so does and obviously, like that is very hectic and probably like, agonizing in a certain way, like you're saying, the impact on your private life. Do they provide, like counseling services and support to their troops, in particular these like specialized units?
Well, I think that the human trafficking unit's kind of forgotten as far as that goes. I'm sure that, and back, I mean, maybe there's changes. I retired in October of 21. I've never had anything unless I went and got my 12 visits like a normal, every officer has their 12 visits.
Yeah, okay.
There isn't anyone that checks in on the mental health of those officers, other than us, each other. And we are like a family. Like some of the detectives that I worked with, we were on the same squad the whole time, all together, the whole time. So I've got, sisters that I've spent 12 years with. Yeah. And we check in. I mean, we hang out. That's my family. Like those are my besties.
Yeah.
So we check in on each other. And I really think that there is a lack of that in the agencies. They may think about the internet crimes against children, guys, and they absolutely need it too. But they kind of forget about the undercovers. Yeah. In my opinion.
And that's
my experience, because I never had anyone check in on my mental state at all the whole time.
And say, rewind the clock like 10 years, do you think, from your perspective and experience and opinion, do you think that is something that's lacking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they think sex crimes is sex crimes. They don't equate human trafficking is also sex crimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you sort of, and I understand that like the reach of your unit was obviously very, very far, can be traffickers from all over the country and probably internationally too. Knowing the location of Arizona in the States, is being close to the border, is that an impactful like issue in terms of like the amount of trafficking and stuff that you see?
Yeah. So I always, when I present and I speak to community groups all the time, I talk about there's different types of trafficking.
Yeah.
Not like gorilla pimp versus Romeo pimp. I'm talking about organized trafficking, like the brothels and cartels and even Asian massage parlors. That's more organized. That's for sure organized. There is someone orchestrating all of that, transporting these people, moving them constantly, finding them, and probably abducting them. That's probably more of the abduction actually going on there.
Yeah.
And then we have individualized trafficking, where we have individual pimps that may have 2 or 3, 4 or 5 girls.
Okay.
And they're trafficking other individuals, those girls or those victims,
Yeah.
males as well. Most of my experience in inner city Phoenix, which is actually the 5th largest city in the United States, that was mostly the individualized trafficking on a daily basis. But every now and again, we'd have a massage parlor that we needed to look at, or a brothel that was opened up. So, I mean, it just varies, but the bulk of our daily would be the individualized. And the individualized traffickers are so transient. They're moving from city to city, state to state. They're only in Phoenix for 3 or 4 days. So it's actually an advantage for them to be very transient like that, because they're already gone by the time I get wind that they were here. Sometimes, unless I have the undercover interaction with them, they're going to get arrested 2 seconds after I stop talking to them. You know what I mean? So it is a little stressful, and it's a hard investigation to begin with, but with that transient element, it makes it even harder. You know, we have people that we know about, but they're gone, and we're just waiting for them to come back to Phoenix, and then we'll engage with them again. We're patient. I don't think that bad guys realize how patient we are. We will wait, and we will engage with you again.
Yeah.
We're going to get you eventually.
And is the communication between different agencies and departments and stuff, is that good? Is there lots of sharing of information? Does it go up to like the federal level where kind of the FBI blasts stuff out, or is it really more each individual sort of department really maybe struggling?
Yeah, so what we have is, and that's another evolution of this that I witnessed prior to hosting Super Bowl. I want to say it was our first time hosting. The first time that we hosted, we did a thing called Operation Blue Wave. And we had invited all of the many cities around the Phoenix area, like Scottsdale and other agencies, and we all sat together in a big conference room, and we talked about coordinated operations. And this is months before the Super Bowl. And some of these agencies had never done the undercover operations. And so that's where we engaged with training those female detectives to be, the undercovers that would work. And then we planned out this massive operation in every single city in the metropolitan area.
Wow.
And we all did it together. And it was the first time that we'd ever done anything like that. And now we have it where we have task forces, and we have like the western area of the metropolitan cities and the eastern area, and then even down south towards Tucson, which is 2.5 hours away. And we have these task forces, and we all work together. And it doesn't matter, it matters jurisdictionally because of what court it goes to. But if we're talking felonies, we are all in Maricopa County. So that does not matter. And we're all going to charge the state code. So you're bought and paid for the entire state. It doesn't matter which cop you're engaged with. So that is definitely a change as well. And we call each other all the time, like, hey, I've got this pimp. His name's Chevy. Do you guys know Chevy?
Yeah.
Do you have a guy named Chevy identified? Those kind of things. And we're very, very communicated now, which is brilliant. What helps, because to be honest with you, we are definitely behind the ball on that, because these pimps are very communicative with each other. They have forums. They have, WhatsApp numbers, and they talk to each other. They travel together. They do things differently now. I also witnessed that change, because before they were territorial and they would shoot each other over a corner, and now they're linking up together. They're traveling together. They're sharing victims together. They're doing counter surveillance for each other. So lots of things have changed for sure over the years.
Yeah, and that was actually something that I was thinking about too. So I just turned 40 last year, so I got my first mobile phone at 16 years old, and it was like, one of those kind of Nokia, not completely like a brick, but it feels like a brick now. And you could call, you could text, and you could play Snake. Like that was the extent of me as a 16-year-old getting a mobile phone, right? And that's like, was something that, yeah, I was interested in, like the evolution of everything that you've seen over the course of your career, because you've got, you know, the like obviously, you know, the internet and it's expansive, but all of those different apps and even like the chat components inside games, and like you're saying, the encryption of things like WhatsApp, and I think pretty much anything Zuckerberg owns has become encrypted now. Is that one of like the hardest aspects of your job in terms of like an investigative role, and even now in terms of like you bringing training and awareness, like the ever evolving technology and like the crooks getting kind of ahead of it before like the law actually catches up to, oh no, now we've got to be focusing on this aspect?
Yeah, I think that's going to always be a challenge because there's a new app every other day that kids are using, and we all have to go switch to and become familiar with it.
Yeah.
So really, it's constant education on these apps and these social media platforms of, you know, where they could be used by traffickers. So it's definitely a challenge, especially to open up undercover profiles. And then some of these apps, you know, they don't do us any favors. Some of these apps only work with location services on. So as an undercover, I don't want the bad guy to know where my home is.
No.
So I'm not going to log into that app while I'm at my house.
Yeah.
But how am I going to act like a normal person to be logging in at all hours of the night, not at my house? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And then some of the apps where the bad guy can delete the conversation from the other side. So then evidence is lost. So we have to be quick about the evidence. And then obviously, you know about Snapchat, and you can screenshot and it tells you the
but then
person.
it's,
Instagram does that now too.
Yes.
And so as a detective, I have to stay up on all these changes that these apps are making, and then also spread the word, because when I do training to law enforcement, I'm telling them what I just learned.
Yeah.
Because this is like literally last month, I think they announced that they're going to do this same similar thing to Snapchat on Instagram. And I don't think all the law enforcement officers know that.
Yeah.
So it's very, very important to keep up on training and keep up on all these apps.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that, you know, brings me to obviously your wonderful organization for a chance for awareness. I think did you say you retired? It was October 2001?
21.
Oh, yes. What did I say?
That's it.
2001. Yes, sorry. I knew what I meant.
Yeah.
And obviously with such a long career, was it a fact that you were just like, it's time, I've done my time? Were you experiencing sort of, you know, that exhaustion and burnout, or you just sort of had eyes on a prize for like bigger and better things to be able to help out in this kind of community?
So I retired with the intent to get a second pension. I want to live that second pension life.
Oh, there
So
you
I
go.
actually, I retired and went over to the state, which is a different retirement system. So I went to Arizona Department of Gaming, and so I investigated illegal gambling. And uniquely, the sergeant there was my old partner, and he recruited me over there, and I worked with him for 2 years. And while I was there, I was bored because it's like I went from all this craziness to we show up whenever and we do our 8 hours, and you know, we might, you know, arrest somebody in a you know, 5 months investigation.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'm very passionate still about human trafficking. I want to start my own business. And so that's where I, in 22, created a chance for awareness, where I have two missions. One is to continue community awareness, because I believe that an informed public is an informed jury. And I need jurors on, you know, in the box, listening to when I testify that a victim is freely walking down the side of the road with a phone in their hand. They are trapped. They are not free to leave. And I need you to see them as a victim because of this dynamic of force, fraud, and coercion and all that is involved with human trafficking and specifically sex trafficking. So I need informed jurors. So I created an online class, and I'm constantly doing public presentations to fulfill my ulterior motive for not only myself, but other detectives. They need informed jurors everywhere. That's why I do the podcast interviews. That's why I try and get on whatever platform I can information about this so that we can get people informed. But in doing all of that community awareness, and I'll talk about my other mission in a second, I'm getting questions from the audience because I'm telling them when I first started, and here's another thing that changed over the time. The average age of entry nationally for the United States, at least, was 15 years old of how young kids were getting involved in trafficking.
Okay.
The national average age of entry now is 13 years old. And in my opinion, we've had lots of contact recently, unfortunately, with 12, 11-year-olds. So I'm desperate for parents to step up and start talking to their kids about this. And so I'm telling this audience this fact.
Yeah.
And I've had the question, well, how do we talk to them?
Yeah.
And so that's why I wrote my book, which is called Talk to Them. And it is literally a how-to guide, on having this conversation. And I modeled it after how I would conduct a victim interview.
Okay.
The timing of this conversation, the rapport building, the, relating it to something else, but trying to get your point across, specifics of those things. And it's not just about sex trafficking in here. I talk about luring a minor for sex. I talk about sextortion. It's not just sex trafficking, but it's all of the digital dangers and online dangers that they face now that they have a complete computer at their fingertips all hours of the day and night.
Yeah, and predators have access to our children in that respect if they're on particular things.
And I'm trying to tell parents, stranger danger used to be someone on the street or in a vehicle or walking by, but stranger danger now is the device. It is the game. It is the platform that they're on. And these individuals, and I've learned this through catfishing pimps on all my undercover social media, that's how they contacted me. And when I did a warrant for our conversation, just the week-long conversation that I spoke to this pimp, they sent and copied and pasted the message they sent me to hundreds of other profiles. And they don't care if that's kids or not. In fact, they're looking for kids because the buyers want younger kids. Yeah. And so you have strangers constantly engaging with your children. And if you don't talk to them about it, they're not going to recognize that happening and self-police themselves and then come tell you, mom and dad, about what happened. So that if you tell them, hey, if you have someone trying to keep a secret or delete messages or speak in a code of some kind, they'll see that happening and they'll be like, wait a minute, my mom told me about this. I'm not going to talk to this person anymore, and I'm going to go talk to my mom about it. Yeah. That's my goal, because that's the only way we're not going to have this growing issue expand, is if parents have these conversations and talk to the kids. And so I'm actually having this translated in Spanish right now.
Oh, brilliant.
So that I can reach a whole other demographic. And I'm having it be an audio book, and then I have to record myself. I haven't had time, but I need to do my audio book of reading it out loud also. So that's available in another way, in another platform for people as well. And then my other mission is law enforcement training. Like I said, I've thrown out there 45 seconds later, I'm engaging with the suspect, and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I did it. I didn't know that I was doing it right. But I feel that's awful to put female officers in that position without any training. Yep. And so being a female that's been there, that's sat on that couch, that's had a sex buyer grab my boob or try to touch me inappropriately, I think that you as a female officer want to hear it from another female that's been there, not a male detective that's watched it happen.
How to handle it.
And I don't think there's a lot of female officers out there doing, training on that. And it's really needed, especially when we have agencies that are behind the ball and don't do human trafficking anything. And so the second mission is not just the female aspect, but investigating these crimes. Interviewing these victims, these juvenile victims. They're not like a regular sex assault or child abuse victim. Those kids disclose. Those kids tell someone. That's how we find out about it. These kids, they are in love with their trafficker. They don't want to get caught. They're be
conditioned not to tell.
Right. They're brainwashed into believing this, whatever false promises and fraud that this trafficker shoved down their throat. And we catch them, and it's usually a uniform and handcuffs and a patrol car and a negative thing, and they don't want to talk to us. So how do you talk to someone who doesn't want to talk to you? Exactly. So that's what I do training on as far as interviewing these victims and then interrogating these types of suspects, because these suspects, they're very savvy. And it's almost an advantage for us to use a female officer, a female detective, to interview them, because they think they're smarter than us and they are absolutely going to talk to us.
Yeah, and they're
Because
gonna
they
like
think they can
think
manipulate.
they're gonna be able to turn on the charm, and you're
Oh
like,
yeah, they can manipulate
no
the
worries,
person.
buddy.
And so as a female investigator,
Hmm.
I feel that you need to have an extra sense of how to interrogate these guys.
Yeah.
And then putting these cases together for successful prosecution is also a class. I've got lots of classes. And then my newest class is very important, because I've unfortunately had so many cases where I've had a victim that we've rescued. They don't want to play the game of going to court and having it get continued, and going to court and having it get to continued. And then we've
Yeah.
got 2 years gone by and
Yeah.
they're like, yeah,
I'm done. Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't want to be, I don't want to deal with this no more. And so those are victim-based cases. And that's the way we've played this game forever.
Yeah.
We need to change the way we play the game, and we need to start going after these traffickers financially.
Yeah.
So then that way, when a victim does do that and they bow out and they're no longer cooperative, we have a whole other felony case going on, and we can pursue them for that without the victim.
Like a racketeering, RICO sort of organized crime thing.
That, and obviously all of the money that they're making is from illegal prostitution
Proceeds of
activities,
crime,
because
yeah.
prostitution's illegal in all of the United States except for a few counties in Nevada, not Las Vegas. People have that misconception. So only a few counties. But that is, in a nutshell, my other mission as far as the law enforcement training, and then coaching law enforcement agencies if they do an operation. I can either do it over the phone, be available to advise them, or fly there in person and participate in the operation with them.
Yeah.
And be right there, because you never know if in that operation you have the focus and the mission. Today we had the briefing and we're only going after sex buyers. You don't know if a pimp's going to show up acting like a sex buyer. And then does your decoy, your female officer, does she know how to engage with the pimp in the room, in the hotel room? If she doesn't have any training about that, she's not going to know. And, it's a very dangerous situation to be in, and we're not going to accomplish the goal of getting this person charged with anything. So all of that to say, I've got a lot going on with all of that.
It's, yes, you sound like a very, very busy woman.
Yes.
And I guess, first of all, yeah, thank you for sharing all of that and everything that you're doing. And I sort of just wanted to go back to the book very quickly. That I'm a mum of two young boys, and I'm a former police officer. I'm married to a firefighter, so him and I have these weird different things that we hyper focus on when it comes to our kids, and his is typically more the drug side because he sees so many ODs and stuff like that, and mine is typically more the offender grooming side, all that kind of thing. And I think one of the important aspects that I think you would talk about in your book is the fact that there's a lot of guilt and shame involved if you, as a kid, get suckered into these kind of things, and like you're saying, building that rapport with your child and having that kind of open relationship. That I think a lot of kids don't tell their parents things because they're scared of getting in trouble.
Yeah.
And so fighting against that, being like, it doesn't actually matter what's happened. You always need to be able to have that level of trust where you can come to me, because when a kid is more scared of getting in trouble than they are of, like you're saying, getting trapped, of sending nudes and, getting something published on the internet, and they're more scared of getting in trouble with their parents. I think there's a complete disconnect there. So I think it's brilliant that you're putting something out there in order to teach parents to have these, what can be very awkward conversations with their children.
Yeah, I mean, it's not your child's fault that the other person told them to keep this a secret. The other person told them to delete things. That idea to do all of this came from that other person. That wasn't your child that thought of that first. So that's who you should be mad at.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I've had those, typically my children are watching devices in the same room as us, so obviously it's something we keep an eye on. But I think it is those things of if someone's telling you this, they're not a good person. If someone's telling you to keep a secret from your parents, that's not right. And I think that one of the things that my husband and I really sort of drill into our kids in particular is like, trust those butterflies in your tummy. Trust that natural instinct that like if something doesn't feel right or it feels off or you're like, we're like, trust that feeling. Because I think we all have that innate sense of getting a bit of an inkling when something doesn't feel right. But you know, that fear of getting in trouble, I think can make them go against it sometimes too.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest, scariest things, besides all of the scary stuff we've already said, is sextortion.
Yes.
Those are individuals who predominantly will act like a peer,
Yeah.
get your child to send an inappropriate image, and then ask them for money and threaten them,
Yeah.
and using that image.
Mm-hmm.
And you have kids that are committing suicide over this.
Yes.
And this is
Exactly.
happening every day and more and more. And that's the big scary thing with
Yeah.
social media as well. That I really, I mean, it's never been a crime that I investigated, but I see that, I foresee that as
Yes.
being huge and awful and the worst of the worst when your child commits suicide. So preventing
Absolutely.
that is extremely important.
Yeah, hugely. And you know, our prefrontal cortexes are not developed at that stage. And like you're saying, a lot of the time the traffickers are like grooming these kids to think that they're in love with them. And I mean, I remember being a 16-year-old girl and, you know, quote unquote, being in love and having a giant crush on someone and the things that the emotions that are racing and all that kind of thing. And I mean, I just kind of think back like, oh, lucky that there were not camera phones back in my day.
Yeah.
But how easily it is for them to get sucked into those kinds of circumstances. And like you're saying, like the worst case scenario, not the fact that this kid is scared of getting in trouble, but yeah, like they feel like they have nowhere to turn and end up completing suicide. And that is the absolute worst possible ending that you can think of. So I'm really glad that you're out there bringing attention to these kinds of things.
Thank you.
I guess probably one of the last things that I wanted to ask you about, because we've obviously talked a lot about like the technology sort of side of it. From your experience and opinion, and obviously you're a subject matter expert in the field of human trafficking and sex trafficking and all that kind of thing, what do you think the biggest either danger or vulnerability is when it comes to being a potential victim of either human trafficking or sex trafficking? Is it, you know, there's lots of different demographics, you know, whether it's like someone's location, their race, their sex, their age, what socioeconomic demographic they come from, you know, potentially what their ACE scores are, or that kind of thing. Is there anything over your experience that has really jumped out at you that makes someone maybe potentially a little bit more vulnerable than anyone else?
Well, that's a hard question because I've had experience with, many victims with many different vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
I think sharing too much personal information about ourselves is a vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we are in a day and age that I'm going to take pictures of what I ate for breakfast, the front of my house. I'm sharing too much.
Yeah.
And, we don't think twice about it because
Yeah.
it's,
It's
we
part of our
being
culture.
this
Yeah.
next generation,
Mm-hmm.
because you and I think twice about it because we didn't really have all of that
Yeah.
growing up. It wasn't so commonplace for, us to be so open about our personal lives like we are now. And unfortunately, this monster that has been created is an open book and an open door to whoever is seeking you out. And just like a burglar will case a neighborhood and choose which house they want to burglarize, these pimps, traffickers, child predators, all buyers, even all of the people who have this deviance about them, you are providing them that ability for them to case you and to look into you and to decide to target you. And it's because we're so open. And we need to actually think twice about that and be more situationally aware about that. In fact, I have a situational awareness class that I'm working on, and I'm going to have
That's great.
that's my second online class that I'm doing at the end of February here. That'll be available on my website, because even in general situational awareness, I think we're just in our phones, we're looking down, we're not paying attention. even that is a vulnerability because you're not paying
Massively.
attention.
Yep.
So
No,
there's so much.
absolutely. And it's even, I think it's something that gets brought up kind of every year in like the start of school. I mean, I know American children typically don't wear school uniforms, but back in Australia, most schools wear school uniforms. And you've got, you're proud as punch and you want to share the fact that, little Johnny's starting kindergarten and this kid's starting grade 3. And you've got an open, so I would just use Facebook or Instagram, but you've got like an open account. You're posting photographs of your children with their faces, with their school logo on their uniform that is easily visible, like all those kinds of things. And now, like you're saying, a predator has all of that information.
They don't have to leave their chair and they can case you.
Yeah.
Because you've opened the door.
Absolutely. So. And it's disgusting and disgraceful that it has to be that way. But I think even in terms of like any technological advancement that we're looking at, as much as maybe they might have like the purest of intentions with just connecting with people or whatever, like there's always going to be bad actors wanting to do evil things with devices, programs, circumstances that people maybe intended them for good. But there's always going to be someone who's going to utilize it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
So talk to me about where, people can either purchase your book and obviously your organization or that kind of thing. Like, where can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. Actually, it's really wherever books are sold, but predominantly everyone shops on Amazon. Right now, it's just in paperback and ebook format.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, I'm working on the recording of myself reading it. And then I actually am supporting another female officer that I met on LinkedIn. So I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Heidi Chance. And she announced that she was doing translation. And so I messaged her. And she is on board fully and excited to help me translate it in Spanish and audio and print book and ebook form. Fantastic. And then as far as my law enforcement training, I have my, I have my female undercover school coming up where I make you provide your sworn card that shows that you're an actual police officer. I'm not going to train just anybody. And that's law enforcement only. And so that's supervisors and prosecutors. I will ask for your bar card if you're a prosecutor to, show that you're a prosecutor. But I really want prosecutors there too, because they need to know that this is how we won't get called by the buyers if we're not consistent with the ads that are posted. But some of that might involve some promiscuous photos and speaking in a promiscuous way, both in person, on the phone, and in the body of the ad. They need to know all that's part of this lifestyle and this game so that they can defend us later on if that's brought up in court. And, and then obviously all of the other classes I kind of talked about. I do lots of law enforcement training in person, but I also do it virtually. I had an agency hire me to kind of coach them and train them. It was actually a class on chatting with sex buyers. They were posing as underage kids chatting with sex buyers. And the reason why that's different than an ICAC case is because we're asking for, we're on platforms where it's a known thing that we're going to want money or some form of compensation for that sex act, which is the prostitution. And so that's where chatting with sex buyers is different. But all of that, you can reach me through my website, achancephorawareness.com. And email me there. I've got a little contact thing if you need to ask me a question. And then my online classes are there as well. The Power of Awareness is what I call it. And that is where I have an entire human trafficking class. And my perception and evolution as I saw it live going through the whole, evolution of how we respond as law enforcement to this problem. A situational awareness class will be there. I have a awareness class for parents, a digital awareness class for parents that I filmed and is actually, I'm going to film my version of it, but I actually filmed a version of it for my partner, Nurses United Against Human Trafficking. And so it's actually hosted on her website so they can take that class there.
Yep.
And we do a lot of things together. I'm very, you know, obviously the medical field
Yeah.
has, besides law enforcement, the most contact with
Yeah.
these victims, because in an instance of this is a very violent crime, and unfortunately sometimes victims get so abused and hurt that they end up in the hospital in the emergency room, and nursing staff needs to know what they're looking
Yep.
at and what just came into the emergency room. And so very happy to be partnered with Nurses United Against Human Trafficking.
That's
And then
incredible.
I have resources. I have
Mm-hmm.
free resources. I've got a list of what I call my sex trafficking indicators list,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can recognize the behaviors and things going on with someone that they know.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you have multiple of those things going on, you might want to ask them, hey, are you being forced to do anything you wouldn't want to do? Like working at night, or someone else is holding on to their ID or holding their phone or controlling their access to their family.
Yeah.
Branded, if they've been put a tattoo on them recently, and then you see that other individuals have that same tattoo. I mean, all of those things have purpose.
Yeah.
And unless you understand all of that and know what you're looking at, you don't know how to approach them. You don't know where to report those kind of things. So
Yeah.
that's on my website, as well as I have like a decoding emojis list.
I saw
So
that. Yeah.
when I'm talking about all these, predators trying to get your kids to speak in code, I kind of made it all in one place on a resource that, is available as well. Um, so all those things, but yeah, that's pretty much everything. I mean, I'm on Instagram, a chance for awareness, with a little underscore in between each word, because it would let me. When I first made it, it wouldn't let me make it all one word for some reason. I'll have to try again, but
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. So
No, that's fantastic. I will pop
yeah,
all of Detective Heidi's information, handles, email address, where you can purchase her book on Amazon, all of that sort of stuff. I'll pop it in the show notes. So if anyone's interested in receiving her training, following, the work that she does, subject matter expert work, we can put your LinkedIn profile, all of that sort of stuff can go in the show notes. That's not a drama.
awesome. Thank you.
All right. Heidi, we normally finish these podcasts off by asking our guests 2 questions. And it comes from the name of the podcast, I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness, which obviously everything we've just spoken about over, the course of almost the last hour, you have seen and witnessed and experienced a lot of darkness throughout your career. So what I like to ask people is, what do you do to, help yourself cope in order to hold space for the darkness that you witness?
Well, I always refer to myself as bipolar. I have my life at work, and I think I'm a different person there, and I'm a different person at home.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of myself for being bipolar, because
Yeah.
if I were to bring that at home, I wouldn't have the life with my family that I do.
Yeah.
And so that's where I kind of hold it. I hold it in
Yeah.
that other personality.
Yeah. You're able
And
to
I'm
switch
very,
off.
and how I cope with it is I'm very much focused on being a different person when I'm at home and when I'm with family. So I think that's what helps me with all of that.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think I sort of, talk about, I think people in first responder roles, I think sometimes there has to be what I would call a healthy level of disassociation, because otherwise you can drown in all of the things that you get exposed to.
Yeah.
And the second question is, so what can someone do? Say it's like a loved one, a colleague, a friend. What can someone do in order to sort of help you hold that space for your darkness?
Um, I think I think lots of first responders experience this when we're in social settings and people are asking us about work.
Yeah.
And that is, you wouldn't ask another person at the party who's not a cop those questions, but you're asking me.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's fair. And I had actually commented recently on another female officer's post where she was bringing that fact up. Like almost, I feel like sometimes I'm the entertainment when
Yeah.
I show up, because they want to hear those stories, but
Yeah.
I'm working to keep that in a separate way, and it's not helpful. So
Yes.
that would be what I would say.
Yeah. I
I'll do that.
wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah,
That whole, like, what's the worst thing you've ever seen
yeah,
question, you're like, Okay, have a little bit of perspective there.
Yeah.
All right, Detective Heidi Chance, thank you so much for your time today. It is greatly appreciated, and I'm so just in awe of all of the work that you have done throughout your career and continue to do. So thank you so much for your time today, and I really hope that the listeners have gotten some incredible insight and value over everything that you've shared today.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm spreading all the way to Australia. This is awesome.
All right. This has been another episode of I'll Hold Space for Your Darkness. I've been your host, Erin Jane. And as always, let me listen in a way you've never been heard. Cheers.